On the royal family Instagram site now, Harry is permanently there for his birthday.
And on their Twitter, and on Prince and Princess of Wales's Twitter.
Yes, but not on the Instagram, which I just thought was interesting.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say.
So I am on X, Roya. Formerly, it will always be Twitter to me, or the Twitter.
Social media formerly known as...
Social media, formerly known as Twitter. And here's the royal family account, at royal family.
Cool.
Nice. All sorts of things on here. Princess Royal has met some hard-working pups at the International Sheepdog Trials in Lanarkshire. A little picture of some sheepdogs. Princess Anne. Here we go. Congratulations to Stephen Stokey Daly. That's a nice one. The 2024 winner of the Queen Elizabeth II Award for British Design. And here we have Duchess of Edinburgh presenting the prize. Nice little vid there. And
hang on. That's not what we're looking for, I don't think, though, is it?
That's not what we're looking for, because what's this?
What's this I see here on my Instagram and my Twitter and my X?
On the Twitter, it's a little cake emoji. And it says, wishing the Duke of Sussex a very happy 40th birthday today. And that was sent to 8:28 a.m. UK time on Sunday, which was Prince Harry's birthday, of course. That was nice.
That was nice.
Then what happened?
Wow.
2 hours later. So that would be nice. Harry probably just having a few drinks on the Saturday night of the weekend of his birthday, turning 40, midnight, nice little message from the King.
Well, it's interesting that it did drop because last year he was at the Invictus Games, wasn't he? In Dusseldorf. And his 39th birthday...
Say it again. Dusseldorf.
Dusseldorf. His 39th birthday wafted like tumbleweed across the royal social media channels last year.
And the year before.
There was nout on those channels.
Nope. Nor for Meghan.
So it was heartening to see a post from the royal family account. Do you know what made me laugh, Kate? Do you know what not made me laugh? Do you know what I thought was interesting? And was the choreography of it. Mm-hmm. I thought it was very interesting, for starters, that the King and Queen's X account and Instagram account posted this nice picture of Harry with a nice emoji and a birthday message. There was then a bit of a pause.
2 hours.
Until the Prince and Princess of
2
Wales
hours and 2 minutes.
Sprung into action. But do you know what I thought was interesting about their choreography? Two things.
Go on.
One was, it was a repost on X. And the other thing I thought was very interesting was it was just reposted to their Instagram story. So not on the main feed, which the King and Queen did on their
You're switching now to a different social media channel.
Well, let's talk about Instagram.
Well, also, but before we leave Twitter, interesting thing about Prince and Princess of Wales, when they do those personal tweets, you have W and C, or W or C, if they've done it kind of in a personal way. Whereas just the sort of generic happy birthday.
But they've never done birthday posts that they've personally signed, any of them. But what I thought was interesting about the Instagram thing, so the royal family's one posted, on their main feed. The Prince and Princess of Wales account just put it on their story. So 24 hours later, Harry's gone. So if you look back at the Prince and Princess of Wales' Instagram feed now, there's no sign of him.
But then a lot of people do that, don't they, with their stories?
Yes, they do. But also a lot of people like the King and Queen's on the main feed.
So it was a temporary, you're saying it was a temporary thawing of the rift.
I'm just saying whatever it was.
You can have good wishes, but it's just 24 hours.
Whatever it was temporary.
Just for the length of your birthday / the Instagram story allowance, then that's it.
I'm saying
back to the omerta.
On the royal family Instagram site now, Harry is permanently there for his birthday.
And on their Twitter, and on Prince and Princess of Wales's Twitter.
Yes, but not on the Instagram, which I just thought was interesting.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say.
Well, that was a brief thawing. It was interesting though, wasn't it? And I think the right thing
It was the right thing. I think it would have looked very petty not to have marked a milestone like 40.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of discussion around the fact that that could have been the motivation for it.
And we're going to be seeing more of Harry in his new, in his 40s, 40-year-old Harry, because he's going to be at the World Child Awards later this month in London on September the 30th. We know that he's going to be in New York as well this month for the Diana Awards. Well, he's doing
quite a lot in New York, isn't he? He's going to Blitz New York, and he's there during Unger Week, when sort of the world's great and good descend on New York for the United Nations sort of environment, climate. Lots of people get together and sort of, it's a big creative ideas moment in the city. And he's doing stuff for quite a few of his charities. The Diana Awards, which is all about young change makers. He's doing something with them. He's doing something with Travelist, his eco-tourism organisation. You're looking like me when I talk about Travelist. He's doing something for African Parks.
Which has had its fair share of negative headlines recently as well.
You've written about that, haven't you?
Yep, I have. The Diana Awards is interesting because remember when they had the awards ceremony here in London earlier this year? We were both there. It was a great event. And William presented the awards then. And then there was this kind of gap where the award winners sort of went back to their hotel. And then they went into a room where they had this video
Harry
call
zoomed in.
from Harry, who was zooming in from California. So there were, he didn't come over to be there with William. William won't be there in New York with Harry. And it's the one thing, if there was anything they were ever going to reunite over, you think it might be the Diana Awards, which has been going obviously in their mother's name for years and years and years. But even that can't bring them together. So that's interesting. Yeah. Sad. And then back in London, but will he meet the King? I think the King will be in Scotland.
The question on everyone's lips, won't it? But the King will be in Scotland. That doesn't prevent Harry going up to Scotland to see his dad.
No. But they would have to talk to sort that out.
And there are ways and means of coming down to London from Scotland.
Yeah.
The Royal Flight. There's a whole fleet of Royal helicopters.
Trains and automobiles.
I don't think the logistics is the issue. I think it's the will, isn't it, on both sides?
Well, quite.
And
if they couldn't get together in May when they were in the same city, it seems unlikely if they needed an excuse not to meet later this month, and there are plenty there that they could throw out.
But back to official royals, because we've had a very, very interesting, encouraging entry into the court circular this week, haven't we, Kate?
We have. So this is the official record of what the royal family do, their public duties, and duly it's reported in the Times. And this was interesting because it was the first official recorded meeting of the Princess of Wales since she's had her cancer diagnosis. So that was reassuring to see.
And she met with her team from the Royal Foundation, the Centre for Early Childhood, didn't she?
Yes.
Which is her big legacy project.
Yeah. It was once described, wasn't it, by an aide as her life's work.
Her climate change.
And the court circular said the Princess of Wales, joint patron, the Royal Foundation of the Prince and Princess of Wales, this afternoon held an early years meeting at Windsor Castle. That was on Monday. So obviously not far from her home where she's living, but official enough that it appeared in the court circular. The last time she was in there, of course, was when she attended the men's tennis championships final at Wimbledon on July the 14th, and before that at Trooping the Colour in June, which we discussed at the time. But this is, I think, it's a small part, a small step forward towards this kind of what she talked about in her video last week about coming back when she can, those kind of small steps towards doing what she can and the work that she loves, which obviously this is one of her pet projects, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting because when that film came out, and I suppose there was a lot of coverage over what would that return look like, and the movies, it was very much that work is, as she has talked about in her personal messages that she's put out over the last few months, very important to her. But she'd said that prioritising her recovery was key. I think what people will take some encouragement from this officially in the court circular is that she feels well enough to start re-engaging on that level. We know that she's carried on with work at home. We know she's held meetings with her private secretary, her assistant private secretary, her communication secretary for a while now to sort of talk about the future,
how
what
it's
that,
going
what
to
that
work.
looks like, the planning for her carol service in December. But I think what will be encouraging about this is that it feels that she's going back into the back into the reeds of her work. And
also sitting around the boardroom at Windsor Castle, it's very official. It's recorded in the court circular. It feels like a kind of concrete step, doesn't it? The fact that it's noted down in the ledger book. But
I think, we will, it doesn't suddenly mean we're going to see sort of 5 engagements with her in the next 2 weeks. Very unlikely. We know it's going to be a light programme of engagements between now and Christmas. But anyway, encouraging all the same, and we wish her well.
And the other royals, of course, been busy. So today, as we're recording, Prince William is in Aberdeen. He continues his campaign about homelessness, homewards. And obviously he's in Aberdeen. That's one of the 6 areas of the UK where he's carrying out this project, and he's been meeting people who work in the sector, saying, it's brilliant. Some of you have had your own experiences of homelessness, and despite the trauma that you've gone through, you're now working in the sector to make it better for other people. So what do you think about this project? It's been a long build up, hasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's a 5-year project, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So he launched it last year, and there was a sort of year of planning, talking to all the different sectors, trying to bring different people from different sectors together to start thinking about the same thing and getting in the same headspace, getting partnerships with, companies like Knight Frank and Pret a Manger, and getting like big name companies involved and seeing where they could help. Then you've had William start to build social housing project in Cornwall at Nansledden. Now you've got him going out into the different areas, the key areas that they've pinpointed where they feel they can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And today we've had him up in Aberdeen talking about how he'd like to see the private sector do more and private landlords see what more they can do.
He's saying,
in
look,
that space.
If you're a private landlord, why don't you look more to rent to people who've previously been homeless? And they're looking to encourage people to do that, because obviously people think, well, there are risks with these people, they might default on their rent, but that's what he's now campaigning for, to get to reduce this stigma so that people can move on with their lives.
Well, we're going to soon, later on in the autumn, have a very special documentary on this, which William has taken part in. And watch this space, listeners.
A royal programme that will be good news for the planet
for
once.
And we will hopefully do something really good on that. And we've got a few thoughts on what we might do on that.
We do have a special podcast on that.
Sleeve there. Anyway, I know we've talked about our imminent visit to Australia, and where else are we going, Kate?
Samoa.
We are going to Samoa. But we've had a few other members of the royal family who've been making their own visits abroad. So
we weren't invited to this one, though, were
we? We were not invited. But Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, has been in Tanzania.
She has.
What's she been doing there, Kate?
This time she's visited the Mlandizi Health Centre. And she last time went there 20 years ago to Tanzania.
Did she?
Part of her. Yeah. So she's gone back. She is a big campaigner for the International Agency for the Prevention of Blindness. And one of the things she's looking at in Tanzania is trachoma. So this is the awful eye disease, which is caused by a bacterial infection. It's preventable. But if it's not prevented and you do get it, it can make you blind, or it can seriously impair your vision, and it affects 1.9 million people. So this has been a long-term project of hers. So she's been going out there looking at clinics where they do these screenings for this eye disease, and heard all about the ways in which they're eradicating the infections. But what was interesting as well, she's going out there on the King's behalf. She went out there to deliver a message from the King, who was very much in support of her project and all the brilliant work that's being done in this field out there. So it speaks not just to her own long-held charitable endeavours, but it's something that she's doing on behalf of HM the King.
And she used to, when Her Late Majesty was around, she used to do quite a lot of international work. And again, I remember her once.
And she's good at it.
She's very good at it. I remember her once, it might have been in a documentary or a speech she gave, where she said that the Queen was always very interested when she came back from these trips to, over a cup of tea, sit down with her and hear all about where she'd been, who she'd met, and how she, the Queen was always very enthused to sort of hear that. And I think, yes, Sophie and Edward have kind of come more to the fore in the last few years, but she's very still, I think, quite under the radar in the way that she sort of goes around. She did that big trip to Ukraine and wrote a fantastic piece for us on the Sunday Times about it recently.
Yeah.
So interesting. And
that's pretty brave to go out and do that.
It was.
In a war zone.
It really was. And then there was a lot of discussion about whether or not, that we would be able to run that piece, because it was during the election period. But, it was so important, and the issues that she was tackling out there, and, some of her long held work in terms of, sexual violence and conflict. And she sort of gets on, cracks on and does her thing. And
they don't kind of bang the drum with the press, so they're not kind of saying, come on the trip, talk about how marvellous she is, write about her or anything like that. It just sort of happens kind of organically, that she just goes out, and doesn't seem to be that they're seeking that kind of that publicity for her in that way, but she is obviously doing doing a
I
brilliant
think
job.
that's what I think it's one of the things that makes her. I think people find her quite authentic.
Yeah, which is that's what you want in
Yeah.
present day marketing and
Yeah.
PR, isn't it? But what's interesting as well, I think, with those two is that they do a lot of solo trips as well. So that trip I talked about 20 years ago, that was her solo trip to Tanzania. So she's been going around and about doing her own thing. You know, we've seen Edward visiting the cadets in Northumbria this week, and they very much have their own schedules. So it's that kind of strength and depth of the Edinburghs that they're really picking up a lot of the slack when there are far fewer senior working members of the royal family.
A really hard-working member of the royal family is, as always, the Princess Royal, and she's going to be
sheepdog.
Back to the sheepdog mentality. There's a theme here in this podcast, and it's a royal sheepdog. No, we're not going to describe Princess Royal as a royal sheepdog. She is going to be in the Netherlands this weekend, Kate. Where exactly in the Netherlands is she going to be?
She's going to be in Oosterbeek.
What brilliant pronunciation you've got there.
Right. Let's just pretend I pronounce that right.
And she is going to be there to commemorate the 80th anniversary of Operation Market Garden, one of the Second World War's most famous battles, and she is going to be representing the King over 2 days, accompanied by her husband, Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence.
That's right, the Battle of Arnhem, which was this huge part of World War II, so from the 17th to the 25th of September 1944, part of this Allied plan, which ultimately wasn't successful, but to force a route into Germany from the Netherlands, and nearly 2,000 Commonwealth and Allied soldiers died in that operation. And it was interesting this week, I think, was that there was a Private Henry Moon, who, as a young soldier, who was laid to rest finally 80 years after he died, after they found out through DNA who he was.
Wow.
Through his remains, and along with a South African soldier as well, and they were finally laid to rest there. So there's been a whole kind of week of commemorations around that. But again, you've got Princess Royal going out there on behalf of the King again this weekend. So it's the King using,
Other
the
members
team,
of the fam. The team, teamwork,
the A team,
teamwork, the A team,
bringing the A game.
It's the team
on the international scale.
It's the team that that's a engagement. That's a weekend I look at and think, in another world, in another lifetime, with a different choice, I think Prince Harry would have really quite enjoyed doing a weekend like that.
Yeah.
Veterans, allies, the armed forces, remembering, honouring all the things that are very important to, some of his work, particularly with the Invictus Games. Anyway, we've also had something lovely this week, something quite moving from Prince William, who has written a foreword of a book by Rob Burrows' widow, Lindsay Burrow. And Rob Burrow was, of course, the Leeds Rhino rugby player who was diagnosed with motor neurone disease. And he very sadly died in June, age 41. And in his final video message, he said, "Every day is precious." And
that was so moving, wasn't it? That message when he could barely kind of speak and he couldn't really move at that point. But it was his kind of take on life before he passed away. But he'd spent those kind of years, his final years, as he deteriorated, him and his wife and one of his teammates had spent a lot of time kind of banging the drum for motor neurone disease awareness and raising money and doing brilliant things. And she was also looking after him. She was looking after their 3 kids. She was also still working as a physiotherapist with the NHS. Now she's on this book. Sounds brilliant.
So, Kate, I think for William to do a forward like that, Rob Burrows and his journey and all his campaigning and his charity work and raising awareness around motor neurone, it must have really moved William and struck him. Absolutely,
yeah, I think it did, didn't it? We saw him go up there to present the CBE before he died, so he had that acknowledgement from the palace. But on a personal note, he stayed in touch with the widow, Lindsay Burrow, and sent a very personal message to Lindsay and their children, their 3 children, when Rob passed away. And I think that really kind of struck home with William. I think you can see that things do really affect him deeply. I remember being with him once where he was speaking to homeless people and he'd heard their stories of how they'd all got to their lowest ebb, essentially, and then how they'd rebuilt their lives or were trying in the process of rebuilding their lives. And, he'd spent ages talking to them. He was supposed to have moved on, and he just said, he looked almost tearful. He was just sort of taking it all on board. And I think with William, he's quite quiet, he's quite thoughtful, but these things go in and they sink with him. You can sort of see him kind of ruminating on it, and he must go home and take that home and look at all the privilege that he has and think, okay, how do we stop it? And it must be frustrating as well, I think, for the royal family,
because there's only so much they can do, and there must be so many demands on that sort of spotlight they can shine on things.
Yeah, and they're restricted by the fact that they can't be political, that they don't have any political power to shape things in that way, but they do have this kind of amazing publicity that they can shine a light on events and impact. And same with Princess of Wales, that the lives of the under five, she can see when she's visiting prisons. She's speaking to the 19-year-old who's been banged up for theft or whatever it may be. I remember going to a prison with her, and she's thinking, well, you had a terrible childhood. Well, how do we stop you getting to this point at 19 behind bars? We make your childhood better. We give you education. We give you ways to improve your life, give you love, support your family so that they can support you as a kid. And I know you've seen it too with the late Queen.
Well, I just, as we were talking about it, something came to mind. And I think it's that thought of when members of the royal family are very struck by something, it's that, there are instincts that move them. Their lives are all about formality and sticking to a script quite often. But it reminded me of when in 2017, in the aftermath of the Grenfell fire tragedy, Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth went to Grenfell with Prince William very soon afterwards. And they went there, and it was a very moving engagement, because I remember the sort of pictures of, people in absolute grief, wailing and, holding on to William and hugging him. And the Queen just listening to everything they had to say. And it was June. And I remember a few days later, it was the same week, we had Trooping the Colour, fixed in the Royal Diary, very formal,
the pomp and pageantry,
very same procedure every year, the marching, the pomp, all of that. And it's always a big day in our calendar on the Sunday Times. Something happens on a Saturday, yes. But we got a heads up from Buckingham Palace very early that morning to say that there was going to be a slight change to the protocol around trooping. And instead of just leaving Buckingham Palace in the way that the Queen always did, in a carriage, she would actually stand in front and lead the nation in a minute's silence in memory of the victims of Grenfell and all those affected. And what was really interesting was the kind of background briefing around that was that the Queen had woken up that morning very earlier than normal, and had just thought, I cannot continue with Trooping the Colour as we always do, as if nothing has happened. I have to change something. And knowing a woman of such tradition and actually liking sticking to the script, changing it up, knowing that the sort of impact that would make.
It's a huge deal for the late Queen.
It's a big call. Yeah. And it was very moving. And I think there's something about sort of when members of the royal family are moved and struck by things, the instinct that's there to act in a way that grabs the world's attention. Right. So, Kate, speaking of social media and birthdays.
Sorry, I wasn't listening. I was on my phone.
Milestone birthdays. This is our 21st. 21. I was only celebrating my 21st just the other day. So it's so nice to have a 21st again. It's our 21st episode.
Yeah. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
And you.
And you.
And you. Oh, that's lovely.
Happy birthday and goodbye, Kate.
We're at the very start of our podcast lives. And goodbye, Roya. Till next week.
Bye.
Bye.